friend, welcome back to my channel. Recently, I posted my Pan That Palette for 2021 finale. If you have not seen it and you're curious about it, I will link it here in the cards and down below in the description box. But now that we are officially in January of 2022, it is time to discuss the palette that I'm going to be panning for this current year. I did a whole video a while ago where I talked about the different palettes that I was toying with. So today I'm going to follow up to talk you through my thinking and my procedure for how I came down to my palette choice for this year, and then share with you obviously the one that I've chosen, along with showing you full-on swatches of the chosen one as we start to move into the monthly updates for the year. I'm curious if you have any guesses as to what one you think I chose. Go ahead and pause this video and pop it in the comments below, and then we'll find out if you are right. As a reminder, there were 5 palettes that I had thoughts of panning. So let's go ahead and start with the losers, the ones that didn't actually make the cut. So the very first one that I was toying with was a pretty large palette. It was the Lorac Mega Pro 2. This, I feel like, had this come out before the first version, I probably would not have purchased the first version. I really fell in love with this a few years ago when I brought it on my honeymoon to Italy. I just feel like it has a lot of really beautiful, cool tones in here. I did eliminate a while ago this entire column of shadows because they just are much too dark for me. And as I was playing with this palette, I realized there are definitely some shades up here in the first 2 rows, the matte rows, that I probably would also get rid of. I'm thinking melon, tangerine, goji. Those don't really align with my preferences. The reason I am not going with this, there's actually 2 reasons. One, I have done quite a few Lorac shadows. I did the Pirates of the Caribbean for 2021. I did the first Pro palette, which took me 2 years to do. And I've also done the Lorac Pro, just like basic Pro palette, which I did in the year 2020 alongside something else. So we've like really hit this brand very hard in my collection. And I will say, prior to doing those challenges, those palette panning projects, I would say this was the most represented brand in my collection. I just love the Lorac shadows. Even their newer formulation, I think, is a really stellar, solid formulation of shadow. So I really do like them, but I feel like it's gotten a little stale to always be doing this brand. And on top of that, I don't really want to do a 2-year project. It just feels like so much commitment, and I'm just not here for that much commitment. I really prefer to do another 1 year, and like arguably, yes, I could do this for 1 year and then call it quits and either put it back in my collection or get rid of it, but I'm not really into the idea of that either. I want to come into it thinking like it's just gonna be a year, and after my experience with the first one, while I loved it and got a lot of use out of it in those 2 years, I don't want to commit myself to that kind of project right now. So this, still lovely, still great, but not the chosen one. The other one I think will be saddening to hear that I'm not gonna go with is the palette I created for myself. I think if I'm being honest with myself, I mostly entertain this idea because a lot of you say that it would be fun to do, but I really think at my core, this palette is a little chaotic. It definitely has focus areas, and I really enjoyed taking out some of the shades from here and pairing it up with my Pirates palette in the last year when I had like no more lid shades left to work with. And I think personally for me, that's how I view this palette. I view it more as coinciding with shadows and not being something standalone. I don't know why I feel that way, because when I created the palette, I put everything I would need in here for typical looks that I do, but I still don't view it as a standalone item. And I really feel like it's much more satisfying in these projects to do palettes that you yourself could be doing at home. It's helpful not only for you, but for me, because sometimes I'll say to you guys like, hey, any suggestions on how to use these certain shadows or like combinations? And those of you who have the palette can say like, I use these two shades together, or what about these two shades? So it is helpful to also keep me motivated. And I don't feel like that is as transferable with this. So I'll keep it, I'll use it, but I don't think it's something that I want to commit myself to using exclusively for an entire year. Third palette I have decided to reject as my project pan is the Urban Decay Original Naked palette. This is such a fickle palette in my heart. I come to this and when I get myself to use it, I love the look that it creates. But I find that with this particular palette, it feels not as dimensional as other choices that I currently have. And I noticed with the Pirates palette, even though I really loved it and it pushed me into new directions with shadows, which were great, I found myself thinking as the year went on, I was like, oh, I wish I had like a pinky lid color, or I wish I had this kind of color. And I eventually got there once I worked through some of the lid shades that were there and I was able to pull in singles that met those needs. But I think I would have preferred having those right from the start. It would have been even more exciting to use that palette all the time. And I think similarly to that, I would have the same issue with this, where I have a lot of really pretty looks that I could do. It's also a little bit cooler, which I love, but I don't think it has enough real variety to keep me coming back over and over again. And so I don't feel as inspired by this and thus don't want to commit myself to an entire year of it, because if it is not already inspiring me, it's not going to get better the more and more I use it. I'm not going to declutter it because I still like the shades in here, but it's not something I'm willing to dedicate an entire Monday through Friday year to. So then that brought me to two final palettes. And the first three I just discussed were pretty easy for me to eliminate, but I really got hung up with the final selection. It came down to the Alter Ego Shadow Kiss palette, which I acquired this year, and good old faithful ColourPop's Fame palette. I've had this palette for a few years and I've really enjoyed it. It's become like my special occasion palette. And coming into this discussion, I really thought, after feeling my like options and kind of spending a week or two playing around, I really thought like, oh, it's gonna be the ColourPop Fame palette, like no big deal. This is what it looks like here. But I have to say, I really do love the Alter Ego Shadow Kiss palette. I feel like you can see I've already gotten some good use out of this, and I haven't had it, I don't know, not longer than maybe 6-ish months. And I feel like it looks a bit more beat up than my ColourPop palette does. I just love the cool tones. This really affirms for me that I think I would love the Natasha Denona version of this. This is actually a dupe for her ice cold like palette. I'm just too cheap. This was like 16 bucks. Then I had a coupon making it even cheaper, and that one is 65. But this is truly the cool girl inside me dream. However, I'm not gonna pick this palette, a little begrudgingly. And the two main deterrents that I have for this is that I don't know if I would be as drawn to this palette in the summer. I don't know if it is too cool for the summer months that I wouldn't find myself wanting to wear it. It does have some like golden bronzy colors in here, but I'm just not sure if I want to exclusively be wearing only bronzy types of looks in the summer as my go-to. So that was really the thing that kept me from wanting to commit to it fully. And there's nothing like really pinky in here. And I feel like when I look at the Fame palette, it has like my three go-to types of looks. It's got the pinky vibe in here. It also has some gold, and it also has some of that like taupey bronziness working with it. I have removed two of the shades that are in here. The rest of these I do expect to keep. I don't know for certain because I haven't like played with every single shade in here. This is a gamble because I found with my Pirates palette, when I coupled in my matte cream from ColourPop, their cream matte colors are really densely packed in there, and it took me a long time to get pan. Once I got pan, I was able to start to make more and more progress, but I definitely feel like with this palette, although I've used it a bunch, I have not been very consistent. So I think it will take some time before I actually see pan showing. I think it's gonna be 3 months is my estimation before we start to get any real pan showing in here. I don't know if this will be a year-long project, if I can finish this in a single year, but I'm willing to give it a try. I also think it'll be fun to do a different brand, like to do ColourPop altogether. I have acquired a few ColourPop palettes over the last couple of years, and I like the quality of them, so I'd be curious to see how they stand up being really heavily beaten up and used over the entire year. It's also older. Like this is, at this point, one of the older palettes that I have in my collection. It's not as old as the Lorac Mega Pro 2, but it didn't come into my life too long after that palette did. So it definitely should be worked through, and we'll see how it fares. So I'm going to officially commit myself to this palette. It also is very interesting. This palette has been in the discussion of being panned for a couple of years, which is similar to what happened with the Pirates of the Caribbean palette. I had talked about that palette for at least a year prior to me selecting it for my project last year. And this I know I talked about last year as well. And it was just barely edged out by my Pirates palette because that palette was just a bigger palette. It took up more space. So I feel really good about this particular palette. I'm looking forward to trying it out. So now that we have the winner, what I'm gonna actually pan, let me go ahead and do close-up swatches for you so you can see what I'm working with. There you have it. I hope you are excited to hear about the palette that I have chosen. If you have the Fame palette, or if you have any suggestions based on seeing the swatches of any color combinations, let me know in the comments below, because we are barely into the month of January. So still lots of time for me to do some playing, kind of see what go-to looks I come up with. I am so looking forward to giving you guys as many monthly updates as I possibly can. I'm gonna try really hard, especially with this project, to be consistent each month. But if I haven't mentioned it or you haven't seen it, I am currently pregnant. I'm due in the first couple of weeks of February. We'll see when baby girl actually shows up, but I don't know how that's going to impact my filming and or my makeup wearing. We will just see. It's my first child, so it's going to be a fun exploration, but I do still want to challenge myself to do this project and to do these updates, because I think it is a really fun project and I just really enjoy doing it year to year. I hope that your new year is off to a great start. Here's to hoping 2022 is even better than 2021. I think my 2022 is going to look pretty good personally, but I look forward to talking with you in my next video real soon. Bye.